This video is created to attract the maximum population of the planet to the global problem of all mankind, from the Russian version, with the help of Russian computer programs, so it may have translation errors, syntax, but I hope the meaning will convey. Hello everyone, sun, sea, beautiful view, good place for a vacation. But, unfortunately, not everything is as good as it seems to you at first glance, on the TV screen. Here now the temperature is about 37 degrees in the shade, and the phone overheats and turns off after a minute of video recording. Even the brain, it feels like melting. I even had to edit the video later, in a cool place and voice it through the bot, so that the important points do not miss, because the problem is not a joke, I'm not a blogger, so for the quality of not to judge, the main thing that was clear. In general, the sun is baking so hard, and there is not a cloud in the sky, it has not rained for almost half a year, although there seems to be a river and ocean nearby. There should be according to all the laws of physics evaporation and coolness, clouds and rain, but they are not. Strange, isn't it? They say it's supposedly a seasonal phenomenon, but whether it used to be so, let's find out. I am an engineer, one of my educations, I have many professions, I know chemistry, physics, and also know hydraulics, pneumatics, mechanics, electrical engineering, automotive engineering, various industrial equipment, and also was engaged in construction, agriculture. In general, I am a specialist of a wide profile. I am used to analyze situations from a scientific point of view and solve various problems. Therefore, being in India, while there is a free time, I want to spend it usefully and to attract sensible people to the global world ecological problem of all mankind, and possibly to find measures on its decision. I think it would be interesting and useful to know if everything is, in fact, as the scientists claim. I think traveling, India, gives you an epiphany on many things, as many visitors say, and that's not even sarcasm now. This video will talk about the possibly real causes of climate change that scientists are not talking about. The influence of religion, education, and politics on it, and about the forbidden water engines that should be in place of conventional hydrocarbon-fueled engines. Since hydrogen engines are emission and pollution-free, they should have been used 100 years ago. Let's analyze their principle of operation, on the example of my developed simple scheme, on the principle, which is not studied in educational institutions, for obvious reasons, considering it supposedly dangerous and forbidden. Although they should be studied and applied, as the temperature rises every year, the climate becomes more dangerous for all living things. As ordinary internal combustion engines, using gasoline or solar oil, have a low efficiency factor, about 40%, while burning oxygen, which also becomes less, according to scientists, and do not fully burn fuel, additionally polluting and heating the environment, because even the great Russian scientist, the creator of the periodic system of chemical elements D.I. Mendeleev said, burning oil is like heating the furnace with assignats, money. Although many people tell me to forget it, calm down, do other useful things, we have enough for our age. But for some reason they don't think about their children? But I don't need to think about them, because I don't have them, so I have nothing to lose, unlike you. Soon there won't be these beautiful views, thanks to the capitalist consumer society. Which for the sake of their capitals, with their barbaric, not humane, negligent, irresponsible, spitting and inhuman behavior will destroy all mankind, and all these beautiful species, this planet, turning it into a desert, which continues to grow, and there will be deserted Mars for you on Earth, if you survive. So, give my and everyone's greetings and wishes to Elon Musk, who has a connection with him, and advise him to abandon the futile project of flight to Mars and its colonization, which was created for the sake of hype and money laundering, and let him try to deal with a more global and useful problem. It is the salvation of the planet and mankind. For example, he will develop and turn at least one desert into oases, for example in Africa, the Sahara Desert, planting billions of trees and laying new riverbeds and lakes with fresh water to stabilize the climate on our planet. This will be a really grandiose good deed, on conditional colonization of the desert planet, because deserts grow faster than mushrooms. And if we succeed, then we can really get to the moon, at least once, and then to explore Mars. And Americans can only make movies about saving the planet, but there are no real actions. They can't even fly to the moon. All they can do is hype on fools, the whole essence of their business. In the USSR they could turn mountains and rivers, and grew forests, until the coup of 1993, when capitalists came and destroyed everything, and still continue to destroy everything for the sake of money, living in one day. The reality in life. We see and evaluate only through long journeys, research, unfortunately, not many, due to lack of finances, and world politics, in particular in Russia, which does not give its ordinary citizens, scientists, engineers, and ordinary workers a decent income, and therefore the opportunity to do so. The visa regime also hinders this, as not all countries can be accessed without visas, especially Russian citizens, and they are given mainly to financially wealthy people, who often have these incomes or not labor or legal, creating discrimination and generating crime. As in Russia, honest labor to earn little chance, especially being scientific or technical specialists, whose official average salary, at best, reaches $1,000 a month. Now Russia is neither the USSR, in which scientific and technical specialist was highly valued, and funds were allocated to study and solve global problems related to ecology. At that time, in the USSR, harmful emissions were less than now, while there were more factories. Now even water from home centralized water supply is dangerous for life to drink. At the same time, even from deep wells, the water is not suitable for drinking, has dangerous chemical impurities, and this is an indicator of the level of environmental pollution, as garbage, to a large extent, is not recycled now, but burned and dumped in quarries, buried in the ground, creating the appearance of recycling, for which companies at the legislative level taxed people double payment for recycling garbage. That's the whole essence of capitalism. And yet the reason for the small budget was the reason to visit India, having seen the main causes of the environmental problem and comparing them with other countries of the world, which I managed to visit and live long enough to evaluate and make such disappointing conclusions about the real causes of climate change, which scientists call global warming, and I call global environmental degradation on the entire planet, which is due to human impact, as a result of draining swamps and fresh water bodies, polluting swamps, rivers, lakes, seas and oceans with various chemicals, liquid and solid chemical waste and other garbage, a process that may not be reversible, unlike greenhouse gases. And also destruction of high-growing forests and bushes, accumulating and desalinating water, what these scientists do not talk about, because the most important problem of temperature increase is reduction of evaporation area from fresh water bodies, which conditionally inversely affects temperature and climate, and there is its deficit. Soon fresh, clean water will be more expensive than gold. Already in the store clean drinking water became more expensive than gasoline. The main version of scientists, the causes of global warming or climate change, about which you will find on the internet, is mainly an increase in greenhouse gas emissions and deforestation. Another reason that these scientists write about is a decrease in the speed of the flow of the oceans, but you will not find any pollution of water bodies and reduction of fresh water as a cause of global warming. Even about the change in the flow of the oceans, there are no specifics. Basically, these scientists rely on aversion of greenhouse gases from burning hydrocarbon fuels and methane emissions, which these scientists blame on livestock, cow farming, which leads me to believe they are incompetent. That's what prompted me to record this video, because greenhouse gas is just a contributing factor. It's good that these scientists mentioned the destruction of trees, but the fact that cows have ruined the climate should be given a Darwin Award. In fact, there are many more causes and factors. These are deforestation, atmospheric pollution, soil pollution, pollution of water bodies, drainage of water bodies, heating of the environment from burning of hydrocarbon fuels to obtain energy, as well as nuclear explosions, which cause disruption of the structure of the earth and atmosphere, various military actions that destroy the biological environment, destruction of the ozone layer, slowing down the currents of the rivers of the oceans, which leads to all sorts of hypotheses, even on a planetary scale, which also take place. Therefore, I will try to cover as briefly as possible all the real and not real reasons, describe their impact, and measures to eliminate them. Since I, like many people, used to trust the opinions of scientists, reading various news, being in Russia, where every year I noticed that precipitation falls less, and the weather seems colder, which contradicted the opinions of scientists, and did not understand the real situation in the world. And in educational institutions, in my time of study, did not pay much attention, at that time not even discussed as an existing problem. Therefore, I would like to discuss the topic of ecological deterioration, aka global warming or cooling. Depending on the latitude, with those who are well versed in this, can correct me, my not comforting conclusions, as no one who does not do anything is wrong. To begin with, as an engineer, I will start with hypotheses. Conditionally, we can imagine our planet as a certain unit or engine, and imagine the causes of climate change as an overheating of the unit, the cause of which is the reduction or shrinkage of the cooling surface, due to the reduction of fresh and clean water bodies, and deforestation, draining of swamps, which work to cool the planet, such as a radiator in the cooling system of the car engine. Conditionally, instead of the main large cooling radiator, which is installed more often in the front of the car, there is only a smaller area left in operation, which is used for heating in the cabin of the car, with a minimum volume of cooling water in the engine, which circulates through a small circle, with the same intensive work of the engine and, therefore, does not have time to cool, thereby overheating. And the destruction of the ozone layer, which affects the increase in temperature, according to scientists, we can imagine as a tinting film in the car, contributing to less penetration and radiation of solar energy, but at the same time, at night, according to the theory, there should be penetration of cold radiation, therefore, at night there should be cooling. Which should, according to scientists, be counteracted by greenhouse gases, which, according to them, accumulate solar thermal energy. But at night there is cooling, and from the school program of physics and chemistry we know that gases are the worst conductor and accumulator of heat, unlike water. Otherwise, in winter, especially in large cities, with numerous emissions of heat and exhaust gases from cars and thermal power plants, forming a strong smog, the temperature would not reach critical minimum marks, which every year falls lower in northern latitudes, so it seems that greenhouse gases do not really affect the temperature. But the fact that greenhouse gases are increasing and poisoning the air we breathe and reducing oxygen from burning hydrocarbon fuels is a fact, and this is a global environmental catastrophe. The hypothesis on reduction of speed of rotation of the Earth, too, has a place, as on it is indicated by various legends, and probably, this reason has entailed displacement of poles of the Earth, and reduction of a current of the ocean on which scientists point out. And the speed of rotation can have a significant impact on climate change, and more precisely on the speed of redistribution of heat, if, for example, consider our planet as a certain conditionally engine or pump, which with a decrease in rotation affects the reduction of the flow of oceans and winds. From what and there is a decrease in heat transfer from the equator to the poles. Thus, scientists contradict themselves about the causes of melting glaciers due to global warming. Since in their opinion warm currents do not reach the poles. The main reason of melting of glaciers on poles we will understand later, and were they earlier? Maybe hypothetically, our planet is hollow, and works according to one of the theories, as a centrifugal pump, which broke down. And according to another hypothesis, from the rotation of the planet and its oscillations and due to the geometry of the continents of the Earth, the currents of the oceans from the equator rushes to the poles. Thus the water heated by the sun constantly had an outflow, but at the same time, the inflow and mixing of cold currents, not giving overheating of the planet in the equatorial part, but something has broken, maybe the shape and structure of the planet. As we can see, there may be more hypothetical reasons than we are told, and no one checks them, so let's go back to the most real causes, which is humans, and consider in detail their influence on all this. But first let's start by delving into history and our knowledge, we will need it to understand. As I hope most of the intelligent humanity, often ask myself the same question. Who are we? Where are we from? Where are we going? These questions are still relevant, and there is still no answer to them, although they say that the Vatican, in its libraries, keeps many interesting secrets, but they are not allowed to them, so we will be based on the knowledge of our ancestors. According to the stories of ancestors, from different religions, myths, legends, fairy tales, which are worth listening to. According to which, a certain creator, aka God, aka Creator, created this planet, our world, in the image and likeness, which is not unimportant. I hope then you will understand this wording. After the Creator created the world, the earth, having made it suitable for life, having inhabited it with plants and animals, a man, or a child of God, was created, in the image and likeness of the Creator, in a body given for an age. Conditionally from here comes the name Chelo, an age. So that he, man, would fulfill the same function of the Creator, develop and create for the good, that is, he would charity or worship, preserving and developing this planet. The good deeds of the Creator have nothing to do with religion and donations to modern temples or any religious or other organizations. Conventionally, all these modern religious or sectarian doctrines are based on the delusion of peoples, the purpose of which is only to enrich religious or sectarian preachers, and no more. These religious organizations, as well as the state through laws collecting taxes from the people, and here, under the guise of serving God, impose on the people through religion and various teachings, only slave psychology, serving some God, to whom the peoples are obliged to present some donations, under the guise of charity, ostensibly for good deeds or atonement of sins before God, where temples or churches act as intermediaries or usurers, although God or the Creator did not put intermediaries before himself, nor did he create temples, and moreover did not ask for donations. The Creator did everything for the good and without selfishness. In fact, all religious organizations, except for personal interests, have not done anything really good, I have never heard or seen that they were engaged in improving the environment, planting forests, trees, recycling garbage, creating reservoirs, creating irrigation systems, helping wild animals and other things. And if you go deeper into their real activities, in the Middle Ages, they were conditionally slave owners, covering themselves with religion. You can study this topic yourself and draw conclusions. The man, according to modern concepts and legends, is the supreme, humane, reasonable being on the earth, created in the image and likeness of the Creator, who is like a child of God or a child of the Creator, in different sources differently, who should live in the likeness of the Creator, create and develop on this planet. And not to kill and reproduce like an animal, but animals do not kill their own kind, but hunt other animals and kill only for food, as much as necessary, and no more, and sometimes they save their possible victim to preserve the population, as they realize that it is their future food and life. And some people, especially religious, kill and destroy often for fun, for the sake of sacrifices, or for profit, or other sectarian rites, thereby sinking sometimes below the intelligence of animals. Often these religious people had and have no knowledge or teachings other than their religious scriptures, which rejected any science in past ages. Did God or the Creator ever kill anyone? Think about it, people. Who are you? Besides, living in India, the most religious country in the world, I noticed that karma works, and everyone earns it, and it has nothing to do with religion. I myself am an atheist. Karma is something incomprehensible, and works on the principle of energy conservation. What you do, you get in return, or even more. I do not know how it works, but there are many examples, so I advise you to act for good. At the same time, watching the inhabitants of India, I made not a comforting conclusion. The more religion, the more disorder, because as we know, God or the Creator did not create temples, did not write religious teachings, did not divide peoples into states by borders, did not ask for sacrifices or offerings, did not kill anyone, but created everything in His image and likeness. Our world, according to legends and myths, was created united, as a paradise on earth, for man, and the climate, perhaps, everywhere was once the same, where on the principle of living organism, perhaps evenly distributed thermal energy on the planet, where each object or living organism is a whole unified ecological system. Destroying one living chain can lead to the destruction of another, so the society should be reasonable, creative, united, which is not now, in the modern world. And the more religion these peoples have, the less scientific development, technical progress and modern knowledge, the less humane approach and understanding of any problems and understanding of their solution. For example, Hindus, in India, perhaps also in other religious countries of the world, religious beliefs, belief in the future better afterlife, and the earth is considered as a transitional launching pad. That's why perhaps they have such a careless attitude to the world around them. They make donations, including sacrifices, to their imaginary incomprehensible gods, which have nothing to do with the Creator or the creature. Not so long ago even a teacher sacrificed a student in this modern world. Conditionally, they live according to the principle of medieval uneducated barbarians, as if the last day, without thinking about the future, except perhaps the afterlife. For example, they catch fish when they are just beginning to lay eggs, all small and large fish, using nets and seines, whose mesh is so small that not even an index finger can get through, allowing the fish to grow and multiply, and then complain that there are fewer fish every year. But the main thing for them is not reason to understand the cause of their troubles, but religion. Since when they leave or return from the sea, they constantly pray to their gods, making offerings in temples built in every village on the ocean shore, and believe that everything is God's will for them. Although you call them their problem, that it is impossible to catch small fish, to fish in spawning season, it is necessary to let fish reproduce and grow, and also it is impossible to litter, to poison fish with different sewage wastes, which they constantly dump into rivers and ocean. But they don't want to hear and understand this. They also point out to you that they are the masters here, this is their territory. Although this world is one, the earth is a sphere, and there are no physical boundaries for rivers, seas and oceans, and the atmosphere. It is impossible, as a person at the customs border, to forbid air or ocean to flow from one hemisphere to another, or to allow it to flow only without garbage, leaving all garbage on the territory of India, but neither they nor the world community, apparently, do not understand this, judging by the situation in the world. Therefore, unfortunately, I observe how the indigenous people of India, who are the largest in number on our planet, due to their lack of culture, humane behavior and education, have polluted the entire environment with garbage, which they also burn, forming poisonous complex chemicals that pollute the atmosphere. This can be clearly seen on the world map of harmful emissions into the atmosphere, where India ranks first in the world, the impact of which leads living organisms, including humans, to lung disease, up to lethal outcome. And most importantly, they pollute rivers and oceans with millions of cubic meters of various industrial, chemical and household wastes, simply dumped into lakes, rivers and oceans. And if you try to teach them not to litter, then you get threats and statements from their side that this is not your country, and I have no right to teach them how to live properly, this is supposedly their territory, and what they want to do, that's what they do. But in fact, no one on this planet, from people, has not created a piece of earth and a drop of water to claim that it is their property. Except for emptying, from processing of foodstuffs, in the gastric intestinal tract, grown on the same planet, a person does not produce anything for the benefit of the planet. There are only a few sane people, who cannot globally change the problems of ecology, as it is necessary for this purpose a huge amount of unification of people on a global scale. But, unfortunately, in recent years, the modern world has seen conflicts rather than unions of peoples, and it is getting worse even than in the Middle Ages. There are massive destructive wars and barbaric approach to the extraction of the planet's resources, and judging by the latest indicators, there is only worsening of the ecological situation. And to pollute, even supposedly one's own territory, is the same as to pollute the whole earth, as everything is created in the image and likeness. The earth, as a single organism, has the shape of a sphere, and is washed by water, due to the flow of rivers, seas and oceans, which is like blood, through the vessels in the human body, distributes evenly heat, energy and nutrients, and various microorganisms throughout the body, and if you introduce chemical harmful substances, in the form of various garbage or chemicals, then changes conditionally in the composition of blood in a person or the composition of water on the planet. And it leads to subsequent death of all living things in blood of organism or in water on the planet, from these chemicals. As a result, organism or planet dies from intoxication or overheating. As an attempt of organism to fight with virus, there is increase of temperature, the planet reacts the same way, but if organism in some cases is able to destroy virus and recover, the planet will not be able to do it. Moreover, at continuation of harmful influence from people. After all, everything in this world is created in the image and likeness, even some scientists claimed about it, and if people behave like a parasite, polluting the planet with various emissions, then in the end it will get a response, conditionally karma will reward them, the planet will destroy everything as itself, and all living things, turning into an uninhabited deserted Mars. So think before you do anything. And now, let's remember and understand why the most important and vital resource for all living things and climate regulation on the planet is clean fresh water. To do this, let's remember physics and chemistry from the school program. We know that all living organisms are mostly made up of water. But its most important property is accumulation, redistribution, energy generation, heat removal, and cooling by evaporation. Unlike air, which is not effective for both accumulation and transfer of heat energy, so it is used as an insulator, therefore, gases have less influence on the climate. And water is used in heating systems in buildings, cars. Since water can accumulate, transfer heat, and cool the body by evaporation of water, remember the school program of physics and chemistry, when evaporating from the surface of the body of water or liquid, the body is cooled, because water molecules, during vaporization take energy from the liquid to overcome molecular bonds and surface tension of water, as a result of which there is cooling. And we also remember that the temperature of vaporization, boiling and freezing depends on the chemical composition of the substance. And if salt is added to water, its boiling point increases by about 8 degrees, hence the evaporation temperature increases and the freezing point decreases. But what does clean water and climate have to do with it? And how does its pollution and scarcity affect it, you may ask? Everything is actually banal and simple. The school chemistry program, everything is created by the image and likeness of the creator. If the water is polluted with additional chemical substances, discharging various chemical industrial effluents, these substances increase molecular bonds and mass, hence more heat energy is needed for boiling and evaporation of the given solution, which is given by the sun, until the water begins to evaporate. After all, only as a result of evaporation clouds are formed, which cover the sun, thereby reducing solar activity, thereby maintaining the temperature of the Earth's surface, which was reached during the initial evaporation of this water solution from the Earth's surface, and the temperature stabilizes. That is, the more chemical impurities in water, the higher the ambient temperature. After all, as a result of evaporation of aqueous solutions, when vapor precipitates, pure distilled water is not formed, i.e. clouds also have harmful impurities, which due to additional chemical bonds do not rise very high, where they could be additionally cooled. After all, everyone knows that with increasing altitude, the temperature in the atmosphere decreases, which means additional cooling of clouds, which as a result of precipitation in the form of rain, have a lower temperature than during evaporation, which provides additional cooling of the surface of the planet. And also, at high altitudes, thunderstorm clouds are formed, which, when erupting, form an ozone protective layer. And the higher the clouds form, the farther they are able to travel, and cover a larger area of continents. To cool and nourish plants and soil with water. This is one of the major temperature and climate controls on the planet. And the greenhouse gases probably have nothing to do with it at all, because the temperature has been dropping a lot at night. This was shown and proved to me in India, where, unfortunately, there are no clean fresh water reservoirs. Local people have so polluted rivers, lakes and the ocean, daily dumping millions of cubic meters of various wastes into them, that they have turned them into a huge garbage dump. Sometimes the surface of water in some reservoirs cannot be seen because of garbage. And being in India, at 37 degrees of heat in the shade, I did not observe evaporation, cloud formation and coolness from these water bodies, though I was sweating from the heat, as even oil films from oil products, fuel oil and other chemical effluents were visible on the water surface, and to overcome this film, during evaporation, water molecules need more heat energy from the sun than during evaporation of even salt water from the ocean. And all this garbage from the rivers flows into the ocean. Many garbage dumps are located near the ocean, and you can see that the ocean water itself is dirty and turbid, forming an unclear chemical composition, which has a higher temperature for evaporation. As a result, coral reefs are dying, as it is enough for them to increase the temperature by literally 2 degrees Celsius. They are like an indicator of the dangerous state of the planet. As a result, we have a global dump or garbage dump on a global scale, and the oceans of physical boundaries has no boundaries, draw conclusions about irreversible catastrophe. The only evaporation I noticed at lower temperatures was over water bodies in the jungle, where there are no nearby towns and villages, and therefore no dumping of garbage into the water bodies. There and in hot weather near the water body and under the trees is cool and there are many animals. And one can clearly see abundant evaporation going on over the trees and water bodies, resulting in cooling. Although in the open space it was unbearably hot. And as it is known, some species of trees can pump through themselves and evaporate up to 400 liters of water during a day, thus there is purification and desalination of water. After all, trees, as well as humans, consist of water and accumulated. Only 30% of their volume is free moisture, and not less still-bound moisture, that is, they work as a water accumulator. But, unfortunately, the number of trees on the planet is getting smaller every day, and trees are like a cooling radiator in a car, creating a microclimate by evaporating water and creating shade, which protects the soil from burning by the sun. After all, only under the crowns of tall trees in a drought can be observed living vegetation, as in open areas all the grass from the sun and lack of rain burns out. Forest is also a home for wild animals. The less it is, the less wild animals, the less fresh water reservoirs, the less evaporation, the higher temperature. This is the second global cause of climate change, associated with global warming, which is happening over the past 2 centuries with mass industry, which contributed to the mass cutting of forests, especially high-growing forests, which are able to their height, and the winds to stabilize, such as sequoias, reaching more than 100 meters, judging by history. Some trees were once even more. And as there are fewer trees, there are fewer riverbeds, lakes, and soils and clouds that can accumulate and store water. As a result, all the water began to accumulate only in the ocean, which caused the world level to rise. Conditionally, all moisture was squeezed out of soil and trees like a sponge, leaving a desert. All this is the result of the impact of capitalist society, which for the sake of one goal, profit, is ready to destroy everything. For example, in Russia now under capitalism there are massive deforestation without planting new forests, forming vast deserts. It is clearly visible from a satellite or airplane. Before the collapse and destruction of the socialist system of the USSR there was no such thing. In the USSR immediately after cutting down a forest they planted a new one, but now they are cutting down the forest that was planted in the times of the USSR, and soon there will be no forest left. For this purpose even businessmen set fire to forests to buy them for pennies, under the guise of sanitary felling, so every year there are many large-scale fires, and the lack of firefighting capacity, which was in the USSR. Since in Russia with the destruction of the USSR destroyed an education, and especially not felt climate change and not studied this topic, because the latitude is completely different, unlike the equatorial, where it is clearly visible. In Russia, we can see ecological deterioration only by the arrival of wild animals in the cities for food. As there are fewer forests, there is less food. As a result, all over the planet, due to reduction of forests and pollution, destruction, drying up of water bodies, we have a deficit of clean fresh water and reduction of irrigation and evaporation surface for cooling the planet. And if to look at the physical map of the world, we will see deserts in the area of equator, on the most territory of land. There are no fresh and clean water bodies and trees now, there is nothing to evaporate, only drought, deserts, and interseasonal heavy rains in the area of oceans are formed, and only at their intensive warming. As a result, we have conditionally, only dirty or conditionally heavy water in the vicinity of the oceans, which begins to evaporate intensively at higher temperatures, forming heavy and warm vapor, creating low clouds and a greenhouse effect, as in a bathhouse. This is the main cause of global warming, as the purer water evaporates at lower temperatures and rises high where it is able to cool, and when it precipitates, cooling occurs. Heavy and warm rain clouds do not rise very high, do not travel long distances, and almost immediately precipitate as warm, heavy rain. They are also known as acid rain, which can also destroy vegetation due to their composition. Most often these rains are heavy and prolonged. They are also called monsoon rains, because they are formed from dirty water over the ocean, in the hottest period, from the maximum heating by the sun, when the maximum temperature of its abundant evaporation of chemical solution has been reached, resulting in its prolonged evaporation, until the solar activity decreases and the ocean cools down to the initial temperature of evaporation. And as we know, water is a source of heat accumulation, and since the area and volume of the ocean is large, this process becomes long and protracted up to half a year, for the period of maximum solar activity. With the formation of abundant vapor over the ocean, excessive pressure is formed, which creates a rapid movement in the direction of lower rarefied pressure on land, resulting in the so-called monsoon winds and continuous rains, which indicate the deterioration of the ecological situation, in contrast to thunderstorms, short torrential rains, which are lighter and therefore cleaner, rise higher, move faster and farther, cool down more strongly, and therefore, when falling, cool down faster and stabilize the temperature of the planet, maintaining the microclimate. The purer the water and the larger the evaporation area, the faster these processes are and the more efficient they are. Water pollution, in addition to evaporation, affects the fluidity, thermal conductivity, freezing and boiling points. This is also the cause of melting glaciers, not from global warming, as scientists claim, and then contradict themselves and claim the opposite, that because of the decrease in the speed of the warm current from the equator to the poles, for example, washing the UK, it became colder in northern latitudes and more frosts, and the temperature began to fall lower in winter, and the equatorial part is overheated, which contributes to an additional reason for the death of coral reefs. That is, the warm current, according to them, cannot reach the north or south poles, which would contribute to an increase in temperature, for the melting of glaciers, from which, according to them, the level of the world's oceans rises. And from what then, according to scientists, glaciers are melting, and whether they are really melting, because according to them it is the only reason, the rise in the level of the world's oceans. Although the main reason, in my opinion, the rise of the world's oceans and climate change I named earlier. The same reason, perhaps, is the cause of melting glaciers. After all, everything is banal and simple. We remember chemistry and physics of school program, and use in automobile period of our century of chemical reagents, where millions of cubes, every year, in northern and southern latitudes, we sprinkle them on roads from icing, which melt ice, forming water, which approximately, on 10 degrees lowers temperature of freezing of water. From what the roads are destroyed and the cars rot and rust. And this is all thanks to capitalists and idiots who do not know elementary chemistry, physics and Copermat. After all, every year, in spring, these millions of tons of chemical reagents, with melting snow penetrate the soil, flow into swamps, lakes, rivers, and then into the seas and oceans of the northern and southern poles, destroying plant and living organisms. And eventually getting into the ocean, increases the concentration of salts and dissolve most likely these glaciers. And also forming clouds containing these reagents during evaporation. They fall in the form of rain and dissolve ice in the mountains. I have not once in winter in January in Siberia and in the mountains, in the Urals, at sub-zero temperatures, observed rain, not snow, which turned all the streets into a skating rink. So the question arises, what is the composition of this rain in winter? All these chemical emissions will soon destroy all life on the planet. For example, in Russia, in winter, moose try to lick these chemicals off the roads, thinking that it is salt and die. And when chemicals get into water bodies, every year tons of fish die, which then rot along the shore, and further scavengers are likely to die from it. So draw conclusions, who you are and what you do, because karma will reward everyone. It remains to analyze one more reason of global warming, according to scientists, who contradict themselves. It is the change of direction and reduction of speed of the flow of the oceans. As a result, according to scientists, warm currents from the equatorial part does not have time to reach the poles. As a result, in the northern and southern latitudes there is a decrease in temperature, and in the equatorial part of the temperature increase, which is not logical for their global warming on the entire planet. Which suggests their lack of competence in the problem. But as an engineer, I have two reasons for this. I have already stated one, but I will repeat myself. This is the reduction of fresh water cycle in nature, due to deforestation, which caused the reduction of flow velocity due to the reduction of its accumulation in trees, soil, swamps, lakes, rivers. Due to accumulation by fresh water bodies, the level of the world ocean decreased, and due to constant change of water body level differences, water circulation in the ocean took place, which stabilized the temperature, creating a uniform microclimate on the planet. The second reason is one of the hypotheses, according to the legends. It is a decrease in the speed of rotation of the planet, because if we study the course of the rivers of the seas and oceans, then theoretically the rotation of the planet influences the course of the oceans. Thus, I forgot to mention, that probably on a planet, many years ago, there was almost the same climate, according to legends and archaeological excavations where in northern latitudes there were found remains of palm trees, and also old stone constructions of dwelling buildings with big windows without having thick insulated walls and furnace heating, which already then has been completed, because of apparently sharp decrease in temperature. A lot of remains of huge petrified trees were found, having a greater height than usual, huge skeletons of animals and skeletons of a human giant, about which there are many fairy tales and legends in Russia. On growth of which, probably renders gravitation, which was other. About this effect hinted Nikola Tesla in the Inventions, having found out changes of gravitation, at the expense of change of a magnetic field at change of speed of rotation. And since the trees were higher and bigger, they consumed and accumulated more water, the water level of oceans was less, probably the lost Atlantis was flooded after cutting down trees or other catastrophe. As a result of greater speed of rotation of the Earth, speed of ocean flow used to be greater, warm currents washed all continents and there were no glaciers at the poles of the Earth, and there was no overheating of the planet, as the days were shorter and solar exposure per day was less. And anyway, we don't really know who we are or where we come from. So you can make a lot of hypotheses. And whether our Earth is a planet, how it is created and organized. It is possible to consider many more hypotheses on a planetary scale. To imagine that our planet is a certain device, a spaceship, in the form of a centrifugal pump, in the form of a hollow Earth, and at the poles there is an inlet, through which at the expense of centrifugal force from the rotation of the Earth water intake is carried out. And under a crust of the Earth on ducts, at the expense of centrifugal force, water rises high in mountains and comes out on a surface under the big pressure, forming geysers and open mineral springs, thus realizing flow of oceans and cooling of a planet. Although some mountains look like stumps from huge trees that have been cut down. Perhaps the structure of our planet was destroyed by people during the mining of fossils, nuclear and other explosions, wars, hence the global changes in ecology. One can also imagine that the Earth is a huge electric motor, with a regulator or controller in the form of the moon, which is constantly turned one side to the Earth, like a rotation speed sensor on a car engine. Since the moon, not corresponding to the usual rotation of planets or satellites in the solar system. Therefore, it is possible that the moon interacted earlier with sensors located on the surface of the Earth, which when interacting with the moon to control the rate of rotation or stabilization from pole shift. These sensors are huge structures that are located along the old equator, which is now shifting with the pole shift of the Earth, as stated by scientists. Which has already happened more than once, which is allegedly indicated by the effect discovered in space by Soviet cosmonaut V. Janabekov. And these sensors are constructions, starting from the pyramid in Egypt, which is clearly oriented on the sides of the world and through it. In one line there are similar constructions all around the perimeter of the Earth, at equal distances, about 6,666 kilometers. Inside these constructions, once, probably, there were located the devices giving signals to the moon, as these constructions remind radiators or antennas which illiterate people, as barbarians plundered, not understanding their real purpose, or specially destroyed. And scientists, historians, being technically not literate, as well as religious sects, usually perceive these constructions as tombs and temples, as all religion of that time and some now rejects a science and technical knowledge, probably, then have contributed to destruction, putting itself as the intermediary of gods. Probably, these constructions interacted simultaneously with electromagnetic field of the Earth and the Moon, corrected stable rotation of the planet, and did not let it to move from the former axis of rotation, and also carried out maintenance of a climate. Probably, and they were shorter, on what hints the Moon and the old calendar, in which month was equal to one revolution of the Moon, which is a month. Now a month does not correspond to the modern calendar, and even the modern calendar does not have a constant number of days in a year. It constantly has to be corrected, once in 4 years, probably because of reduction of speed of rotation. It is also possible that the Moon, in addition to controlling the speed of rotation, carried out the change of gravity on the Earth, interacting with the magnetic field and many pyramids, which are located throughout the Earth, like cell phone towers, but destroyed. And thanks to this, it is possible to move around the planet and to build the same buildings and huge structures of stone and granite, on all continents, to which there are no access roads for heavy machinery, and a horse-drawn cart will not withstand even a ton. But this someone or something destroyed, as many constructions, which with modern equipment is still impossible to reproduce. In general, there are more hypotheses and questions than answers to them. It is possible on these assumptions a heap of various interesting fantastic movies to shoot. Draw your own conclusions. As a result, the most real global causes are the human impact from the pollution of the planet with garbage, various chemical emissions and waste polluting water bodies and the environment. This is well observed in India, the cutting down of high growth and evergreen forests, as well as military destructive actions, nuclear explosions, the use of energy generation by burning hydrocarbon fuels, the emissions from which further heat and pollute the planet. Therefore, to restore ecology and favorable climate on the planet, it is necessary to start with a single reasonable society and a single world program of education and encouragement, as not one country is the mass cause, but the whole world. For this purpose it is necessary to pass to the real world, planned economy and ecology, to get away from the capitalist system, having created a conditionally ideal world. Recently I came across a song from 1971 by John Lennon, from the Beatles group, where he sings about the world without religions and borders. In his song, Imagine, the idea is similar. Apparently for these views he was killed. It is like a perpetual motion machine, a forbidden topic. Although the reason is clear, the world ruling elite is afraid to lose control over the people, but does not want to rethink anything, as on the contrary, the world governing body will remain united. They can only benefit from it, getting rid of wars and economic and ecological crisis and stagnation in development. But this is another and long topic. Although these views are quite realistic and realizable, and necessary. After all, if you add up the money of all countries in the world, spent on wars and armament for 100 years, and add to it the amount of all the world's destruction caused by wars, the sum would be enough to build a good house and a car for every inhabitant of the planet, and there would be enough left for life and development. This makes it clear that if the whole world passes from the capitalist system to a real planned economy based on the principle of creative, social, communist system, for redistribution of goods, finances, resources between the peoples of the whole world, based on a planned economic world program, forming and distributing resources through a single database on the principle of an online store, where the main goal is to optimize commodity production and distribution, so that the plan is not overfulfilled with unnecessary products, which will lead to an increase and overconsumption of raw materials and energy, and thus increase harmful emissions and garbage. This will allow production facilities to quickly adjust to the production of new demanded products. This system will have to switch to the production of quality reliable products, with the longest possible service life, to reduce energy and raw material costs, and reduce working time for remanufacturing of defective products, and therefore reduce harmful emissions and excessive waste from production and disposal. Quality services will not only provide quality, but also reduce the amount of rework. This will eventually lead to a reduction in working hours, which will give workers the opportunity to spend more time with their families and on the development of creative skills of each person. After all, family and free time for creativity is one of the important and main meanings in human life. It is a model of life in the likeness of the Creator, to create and develop. This principle of economic development with redistribution of resources, creation of a single base with a single tariff rate, depending on qualifications, a single currency and a personal wallet on the principle of cryptocurrencies, will control the entire process for the world governing community, and will almost eliminate crime. It will be impossible to rob with electronic money. This will solve the problem with migration, as people everywhere will be able to receive the same goods and services, earn the same, depending on qualifications, and by redistributing funds from one region to another. If there is no work according to the plan in other regions, will reduce working hours by reducing the number of workers in unnecessary areas with retraining and redirecting them to the right sphere. For example, this system will allow to release the military sector to a greater extent, as it will not be needed for defense and wars, because of the single world system, except for control and suppression of uprisings of criminal groups of dissenters, but the police may be enough for this. And the main part should be directed, for example, to improve the ecological situation in the deserts, for their development, planting trees and creating irrigation channels, creating sources of fresh water, cleaning water bodies. To reanimate the nature once destroyed by people and restore the climate. It is now very important and necessary to start purifying water and recycling garbage. Reduce deforestation, reduce the use of chemicals or, if necessary, switch to biodegradable products, for example, use high temperature and high pressure instead of detergents in dishwashers. Reduce to the maximum the use of hydrocarbon fuels for energy and switch to water or another environmentally efficient energy source. After all, when burning gasoline or diesel fuel in internal combustion engines, much less energy is produced than from water, and the fuel is not all burned. They burn oxygen, which is less and less on the planet, and emissions pollute the atmosphere and the planet. The great Russian scientist and creator of the periodic table of chemical elements D.I. Mendeleev said 100 years ago, burning oil is like heating the furnace with assignments. It is necessary to utilize the energy that nature provides to the maximum extent and without damage to the world around us. For example, the energy of the sun, or better, the energy of water from waterfalls or its decay. For example, by creating a water cycle in nature, at the expense of waterfalls, using the difference in altitude of the seas, which for example is about 400 meters between the Dead Sea and the Red Sea, and laying a channel between them, you can get not bad power hydroelectric power station for endless energy production, provided that the calculation that the incoming water, doing work, would have time to evaporate. For this you need to calculate and create its maximum distribution on the surface for evaporation due to physical principles, as well as by absorption and evaporation by plants, which are the most effective sources of energy. And many other, no less effective sources of free natural energy, in obtaining which the world capitalist hostile policy, which parasitizes all societies in the world, covering itself with market economy, but has nothing to do with the real essence of the economy at all, prevents. Which contributes only to the aggravation of the world's main ecological and economic problem. Therefore, to start correcting the global ecological catastrophe, it is necessary to change the world economic system, plant forests and reduce harmful emissions from burning diesel fuel, gasoline, coal, fuel oil, which are used to obtain thermal energy for heating homes, or which is converted into mechanical energy for the movement of cars, ships, locomotives, and to switch temporarily to natural gas, from which there are fewer harmful emissions several times, and it is constantly formed on the planet itself and even goes to the surface. This natural gas is enough without oil processing as fuel, and gradually switch to alternative non-fuel source of energy, for example, from water and sun, to leave or reduce processing of solid and liquid natural resources to obtain energy. It is necessary to reduce and even prohibit the cutting of forests, which are often used by residents as firewood to heat their homes, and in return, oblige the state to provide free gas to all residents. For example, in Russia, where an average of 10 cubic meters of wood in the winter season is used to heat 45 square meters of housing. Thus we will be able to save from 15 to 20 trees from each house, which is now heated with wood in Russia, and which in Russia alone, almost half of the country, especially in small villages and towns, where the gas pipeline, according to officials, it is not economically profitable for the state to lay, and the residents themselves are not able to pay for all the costs of construction of the pipeline, the whole essence of capitalism. That is why, in the presence of huge reserves of natural gas in Russia, many residents still use wood or coal to heat their stoves, because, since the collapse of the USSR and the seizure of all natural resources by the criminal community that now rules Russia, resources are limited for ordinary citizens. Since, for connection, if there is a gas pipeline near the house, in 15 meters, require from $1,000 to $2,000, in translation from the ruble exchange rate, and even higher, depending on the distance, and it will still be necessary to pay for additional equipment for heating, and accordingly pay for the consumption of gas, which is unreasonably expensive. Although the cost of maintaining and servicing the gas pipeline is several times less than the cost of construction of the pipeline, the cost of construction of which is already included in the cost of gas supply to the consumer, because the gas is natural, there are no costs for its production, that is, officials are trying to get payment from the consumer for the gas pipeline in addition to gas consumption, where the price of the pipeline is taken into account, as they say in Russia, to take three hides from the people. At the same time, the wages of gas pipeline workers and gas consumers do not increase in the same proportion as the price of gas increases. On the contrary, salaries are falling in relation to the price growth. Even some employees often have no indexation of salaries and pensions, even for the official inflation, which in fact is several times lower than the real inflation, as indicated by the interest rates of the central bank. In fact, every month, over the past years, there is a constant rise in prices, which is higher than the official rate of inflation of the central bank, because the central bank itself has an interest rate of loans above the official rate of inflation. And as an axiom of economics, inflation cannot be less than the credit rate set by the central bank, especially since Russia does not produce almost products, that is, it has almost no GDP, gross domestic product, it is very low, there is only the sale of raw materials, which has nothing to do with GDP. This is a substitution economy now in Russia. There is mainly a resale of imported products, mainly from China, cheap not the best quality goods, obtained by buying them with borrowed credit funds under the credit interest of banks, which issue loans always above the interest rate set by the central bank, to which should be added the profit percentage of a usurer, speculator, or enterprise. As a result, in the aggregate, the price rise has now reached more than 50%, and this proves and shows not the effectiveness but the parasitic nature of the banking sector, which manages the economy, creating a simple market or bizarre unstable system, that is, banks destabilize the real economy. And indexation of salaries and pensions is made, at best, at the official rate of inflation, specified by the central bank, which is 5 or more times less than the real growth of prices. Conditionally, there is an official legal robbery of the people by banks, the state and other parasites in the form of speculators. Therefore, now many people cannot afford to buy many products, including the connection of gas, as a vital resource, such as an ordinary pensioner, and even an ordinary worker, because the average pension of an ordinary former employee, without any titles, awards and other benefits is about $190 a month, and the average salary of a simple worker and even engineers about $700 a month, depending on the exchange rate of the ruble. Today it is 90 rubles per $1, and you still need money for food. And if there is no gas main near the house, you will have to pay not only for the connection to the gas main, but also for the construction of the gas main, which will be measured from $10,000 and can reach several $100,000, depending on the distance. Although abroad gas pipelines lead free of charge to consumers, everything is already accounted for in the contract in the cost of gas. That is why there is a price for gas. It is not produced, but only transported. That is why it is natural, and in some places openly comes to the surface of the earth, and it is very harmful to living organisms, why it should be used as much as possible, and not oil and other fossil resources. As a result, not everyone in Russia can afford to connect and use gas. That is why many people buy firewood at the expense of the remaining mandatory subsidies from the times of the USSR, which Russian officials often do not fulfill, for partial supply of wood to the population for firewood from the state, and those only for pensioners, and the volume of firewood is sometimes not enough for the heating season, but still it is cheaper to heat houses with wood or coal than to connect gas and install gas equipment. And as I said, there are a lot of such houses, and the program of alleged gasification in Russia is only on paper. You have to pay extra for everything in fact. And now imagine how many forests can be saved from being cut down, as well as refuse to use coal, from which a lot of harmful emissions. Economic development in Russia is so far behind that train cars are still heated with coal. It is already the last century. And coal is still the surface of the land. Imagine that all this will be burned, and we will form around only quarries, mines and forming cavities and pits, which will eventually be flooded with water, and so the ocean is gradually swallowing the continents. The same is true for cars in Russia, which could be converted to natural gas, but the bureaucratic capitalist policy prevents this. As in addition to the cost of equipment and its installation, it is necessary to pay additionally and get permission from the police to convert the car, which was not necessary before, as all cars were converted without police permission. For this there are car workshops with certified specialists and certified equipment, which they select and install in accordance with the engine of the car. And the police are not technically literate people, who should only deal with road safety, keep an eye on the road and compliance with traffic rules, their whole essence, which they often do not fulfill. and their permission to make changes in the design of the car, which consists only in registering the document and collecting additional payment for it, has nothing to do with road safety. That's another essence of capitalism. All these additional bureaucratic actions and payment for each permit and visual inspection, additional unqualified specialists only complicate, hinder, taking only time, and makes it economically unprofitable to convert cars to natural gas. But it should be implemented. At the same time, gas has become several times more expensive than it was before the sanctions for Russia. Since the bourgeois class, which has seized the people's power and natural resources and enterprises in the country since 1993, now needs to maximize the same profit as before the sanctions from the sale of gas inside the country, so it is cheaper to drive on gasoline. And there is no need to pay anything extra for retrofitting and other paperwork or another whim of an official, which does not give any real safety, because all the equipment is licensed at the international level, and this official has nothing to do with the installation of the equipment. It is installed by a licensed company, which is paid separately for the installation of equipment. This is the essence of world capitalism or market economy. Instead of one payment included in the cost, the state in the form of officials of the bourgeois class is trying to get double or triple earnings on the population, without actually doing anything in addition. For example, the same garbage reform, which should be aimed at recycling garbage, and according to the law in Russia, this service has already been paid by the manufacturer and supplier of goods, in the form of duties for disposal and taxes. But the next official, under the guise of a law, introduced for citizens an additional forced payment for the disposal of garbage, which is already paid in taxes and fees for disposal, and payment for this service, more than the norm of consumption, with no improvement in garbage collection. Its processing has not become, as well as improving the environment, but on the contrary. Garbage in the majority is not processed, and do not recycle, as there is not built the promised garbage processing plants. Only a few incinerators, polluting the atmosphere, exist. Basically, the garbage is just buried in huge pits, old quarries, covered with material, and covered with soil and planted with lawns, so that animals would not scatter it and the dump would not be visible. Where, in their opinion, the garbage will eventually rot and recycle itself, even without hiding it. In one of the regions in Russia, they proudly announced and showed it on TV, without sarcasm, as a new modern method of disposal and recycling of garbage, without thinking about the harmful consequences, such as groundwater, which will lead to contamination of all the soil and rivers around the dump. The officials themselves then declare, complaining that water from wells becomes unfit for drinking. That's the whole result. And I want to add that no mechanical filter, which are used for water purification, will not save and restore water to the necessary state of potable natural water, necessary for organisms. It has already been tested. After all, simply burying garbage is like putting dirt or poison under the skin or in the muscle mass, which will eventually dissolve and infect and poison the whole organism, the consequences of which will lead to its destruction. This is how illiterate or greedy one should be to think of such a thing. Draw conclusions about what you are striving for. All for the sake of money, making money at any cost, without thinking about their offspring. That's the essence of capitalism. That's why I propose a humane approach of redistribution and control of all resources, goods, population on the planet through a single world reasonable center, as everything and everyone has enough on the planet, if you approach reasonably. And the whole essence of market economy or capitalism leads only to bureaucracy, corruption and destruction of all living things on this planet, and has nothing in common with real economy. There are many more examples on this subject. Therefore, we need a single world international reliable economic controlling organization, a single center, as a single state, which would carry out the world order and redistribution of resources to everyone who needs them, which will be enough for everyone on the planet, as well as the creation of common standards and industries, by uniting conditionally all institutions in a single think tank, capable of accumulating, analyzing and solving complex problems, conditionally as a single server or a single most powerful computer, which is able to solve any problem faster, because it has more knowledge and programs and power than a normal computer, which cannot cope with this task, and it will take more time. These associations should contribute to the settlement of peace, stopping war and destruction on the planet, creating a social communist creative economic society, to restore ecology, by developing and implementing new environmental technologies, mass planting of trees, recycling of garbage, by building sewage treatment plants and garbage processing plants, to abandon hydrocarbon fuels, replacing, for example, with water, from which there is no exhaust, and as a result of which it is possible to get additional oxygen, and even if it is not possible to get additional oxygen, it is possible to get additional oxygen when combustion of the obtained gas from water. Energy is obtained several times more than from gas-air mixture from gasoline or solar oil of the same volume, and there are no harmful exhausts and emissions. The same water is formed and oxygen is not burned. But this gas from water, as well as mercury, is considered dangerous, and the technology is prohibited. Mercury also has many properties. With the right approach you can get excess energy, just like burning rattlesnake gas from water. And those who will now start to cite the law of physics on the conservation of energy. This law has long since been disproved. Now the program of education serves only to form a slave psychology, making a person a novice, to build into the system. To disprove the law of conservation of energy, build a detector radio, which works perfectly well without batteries, if you even know what it is, and get free energy. Everything comes from nature, in its image, where every plant has a high efficiency, otherwise we wouldn't exist. Therefore I propose, for the good of the planet and society, to consider my idea, a couple of schemes of engines or power plant on water, more precisely on rattlesnake gas, which has completely different properties when burning, not like gasoline air or just hydrogen air mixture. It is the absence of exhaust gases and the formation of steam, which turns conditionally partially into a vacuum when cooling, which many teachers of chemistry and physics do not even know, as even now, it is not studied in school programs for obvious reasons. And due to formation of partial vacuum, it is possible to get more energy than energy consumption for obtaining rattlesnake gas. As on reception of hydrogen leaves on calculated data as much energy as it is received at its combustion, but these data at scientists constantly different and they try to adjust them to the law of preservation of energy. But there were already skillful people who could get much more energy from water than they spent, but they were killed for obvious reasons. For example, the well-known Stanley Mayer, who created a car on water. And all thanks to the Patent Bureau and people's greed. So I, according to the principle of Stalin's Epic of Engineers Inventors, just make my idea public, so that people could use, develop and realize it. About 15 years ago, I was engaged in my various inventions, when I had time and space to carry them out. But, unfortunately, there was not enough money, and then there was no place, time and money to invent in modern capitalist Russia, where you have to pay for everything, and for an individual manufactured part, even 10 times more than for a serial one, so I had to give up, because of lack of funds. Although earlier, under the USSR, it was possible to produce any part at the factory, through institutes or technicians' clubs, or even just by applying to the enterprise, for pennies or almost free of charge, at the expense of public funds of the state, depending on the purpose. Now everything is like in Tsarist Russia, a complete stagnation for engineers inventors, if there is no financial opportunity. So this idea is for those who have the means and opportunities for its realization, with a technical mind, who can understand the principle of operation, setting, where in theory should get more energy than when you get exactly rattlesnake gas, due to the formation of a partial vacuum after combustion. It is also not unimportant to correctly design and finalize the electrolyzer, which also has a peculiarity, due to the configuration and resonance to get more gas, because the calculated constantly differ from the actual. Rattlesnake gas has an energy and rate of combustion several times that of a gasoline air mixture of the same volume, and when burned it forms vacuum and water. Therefore many inventors who have tried to introduce it into the ordinary reciprocating internal combustion engine have been unable to accomplish anything. It is not suitable for this purpose. Since the gas burns quickly, from which detonation occurs, and after a vacuum is partially formed, the piston does not have time to make a working stroke, as it begins to vacuum pull back. And in general, the piston engine is the most primitive and energy inefficient internal combustion engine, with low efficiency, where a lot of energy is spent on the reciprocating motion of the piston and connecting rod, so the rotary engine is much more powerful. Therefore I propose to disassemble two, the most simple schemes, one as a power plant on the principle of the heart, and the other engine, more complex, two-rotor. I hope you understand and design and finalize, and I will draw and explain the principle of operation. Let's consider the first scheme, in Figure 1. The simplest installation of a hydraulic engine running on rattlesnake gas, using two working strokes or the energy of high pressure and vacuum obtained by explosion, having no exhaust at all. This installation consists of 11 elements. 1. The working cylinder, 2. The high pressure cylinder or accumulator, 3. The low pressure accumulator, 4. The check valve, 5. The hydraulic engine, 6. The throttle or tap, 7. The spark plug, 8. The generator or load, 9. The gas injection nozzle, 10. The electrolyzer, 11. The gas storage and safety valve. This system is explosive, as rattlesnake gas is very explosive, has a higher power several times than gasoline air mixture, so the pressure in it can reach up to 150 atmospheres. Everything must be calculated and provided for safety. It is strictly forbidden to conduct experiments in living rooms. Personal experience: the check valve did not work, the gas accumulator exploded. Luckily, it was not a large volume, almost the glass did not fly out in the apartment, and my eyes remained intact, thanks to the fact that it was made of soft plastic can. So work only with glasses and at low volumes and not in residential areas. After that I stopped doing these experiments in residential areas and in general, as there used to be a garage for this. The process of operation of this system as a motor or generator is as follows. The whole system is closed and filled with liquid, water. The working cylinder 1 must be filled with at least 12 parts of the volume of the working gas mixture. Consequently, in the high pressure accumulator 2, there must be the same free volume of air, and in the low pressure accumulator 3, must be completely filled with liquid and have a volume not less than the volume of the working cylinder. The working stroke is as follows. Through nozzle 9, the rattle gas produced by electrolyzer 10 enters the accumulator or accumulator 12, then through the safety valve and through nozzle 9, is fed into the combustion chamber gas, due to the discharge pressure, but not more than 1/12 of the volume of the displaced liquid, although it may be less, since there is no calculated exact data. After that, due to the spark plug 7, the gas is ignited, the burning mixture explodes and expands, and from the working cylinder 1, the liquid through the check valve 4, flows into the accumulator 2, creating pressure in the system. Then from the accumulator 2, through the throttle or tap 6, the liquid begins to rotate the hydraulic motor 5, which can rotate the generator 8, or other device. At the same moment, after the combustion of the gas, a vacuum is formed sharply, which begins through the check valve 4, to suck the liquid from the accumulator of reduced pressure 3. Thereby adding power and torque to the hydraulic motor 5, by increasing the pressure due to the difference between the 2 and 3 accumulator. The cycle is then repeated, with periodic purging of the excess volume. I had a lot of ideas where you can realize this scheme, on the example of the second figure, as a jet propulsion for the boat, or as a pump. In general, try, refine, develop, create for the good and share your ideas and thoughts on the subject. The second idea, the rattlesnake gas engine in Figure 3 is the most complex and labor-intensive, which requires very complex engineering solutions and calculations, consisting of 1 rotor, 2 rotor, 3 stator, 4 ratchet, 5 combustion chamber, 6 overpressure chamber. The principle of operation is as follows, where all rotors rotate only in one direction, due to the direction of the ratchet 4. To begin with, in the combustion chamber 5, Figure 3, A, through a nozzle is fed rattling gas, not more than 1/10 of the volume of the overpressure chamber, after which there is a spark formation and gas explosion. From the increase in pressure in the combustion chamber 5, there is a rotation of the rotor 2, Figure 3, B. The rotor 1 stands at this point in place, while there is a compression of air in the chamber 6, creating excess pressure and acting as a spring. After combustion of rattlesnake gas in the combustion chamber 5, vacuum is formed, which begins to rotate the rotor 1, and in addition, this contributes to the accumulated overpressure in the chamber 6, Figure 2, C. At this point, the rotor 2 stands still, then the cycle repeats, with periodic blowing. In general, there are a lot of ideas, but to realize, judging by the fact that they have been in my head for more than 20 years, there is no possibility, as there is no possibility to go legally to a more developed country, so for legalization you need viscous reasons or money. After all, modern Russia is all destroyed factories and jobs and labor for pennies. There is nothing to do here, there is no opportunity for development. This is not the USSR, under socialism, where there were factories, people earned money and had means, and most importantly time, and clubs for inventors of interest. Now in Russia there is only slave labor for pennies, 24 hours for 7 to survive, and KB, red and white, at every turn, instead of design bureau, so as not to strain the brain after work. That is the whole essence of modern Russia with its capitalism. Those who have opportunities, modernize, implement the idea, and share. Develop, create as a creator, change the future and take care of our planet and your karma. We still have to live here, and even more than once. But this is another topic. There will be time, I will tell you something else, as there are a lot of ideas. Bye, everybody. Conclusion. 1. Trees are first and foremost a source of oxygen and fresh water, creating a climate and home for all living things. No trees, no purified fresh water, no climate regulation, no life, no home or habitat for all life on Earth. 2. Fresh water is the main necessary source of life for all living things. It is like blood in the human body, which cannot be poisoned, polluted, otherwise the whole body will die. Water is a source of endless ecologically clean energy and a heat carrier. 3. Religion has nothing to do with God or Creator. God or Creator did not create religion, did not put intermediaries between each other, did not divide peoples. Religion is a kind of sect, aimed at enslavement and obedience of people, who are intellectually underdeveloped and easily subject to psychological influence, in order to manipulate and control them for the state, as well as to distract people from scientific development, thinking, studying and solving various problems, as scientific development would make people realize that there are no intermediaries between the Creator or God in the form of religious sects, which would prevent them from managing and enslaving people. And the more religion, the more temples, the less schools and institutes, and consequently, the less scientific humane creative development of man and his solution of problems in the likeness of the Creator. Religion is like an opium for underdeveloped people, subject to easy psychological manipulation, which makes a biomass out of a human being, who is not capable of individual critical development and thinking as a human being, in the likeness of the Creator, but begin to rely on the God invented by religion, to solve their problems. After all, everything in this world is created in the image and likeness, and religion has nothing to do with it. It even destroys this world with its appeals, making people into patriotic novices, with its psychological influence, for the clear goals of states. 4. All world problems with climate, pollution of ecology are the result of people's life activity only because of irresponsible, negligent attitude, and solar activity, which scientists refer to in greenhouse gases have nothing to do with it. It is another excuse of scientists and those in power to hide the real cause, which was created by people themselves, through capitalist economic policy, where money is valued above life. As a result of this policy, which led to mass felling of trees and pollution of water bodies, as a result of which cataclysms are increasing every year, which will continue to increase because of inaction and negligent attitude of people. And scientists, most likely, are not mistaken in the reasons of cataclysms, but do not finish, or carry out political program of capitalists, to whom money is more important than life. 5. Everything in this world should be in measure, and according to the plan. Even birth rate should be controlled, but not by wars, but by a reasonable political system, because the resources of the planet are not unlimited, and the more population growth, the more natural resources and trees are destroyed to create cities and fields to feed people. The fewer trees there are, the worse will be the ecological situation on the planet, because tall trees are life, and desert is death. In addition, the more garbage and waste products of human activity, which do not have time to recycle, if their number will be as it is now more critical mass, it will lead to poisoning and destruction of the planet. 6. The modern banking sector of management and regulation of the world economy, contributes only to the regression of the economy, has a parasitic effect on it and no more, thus slowing down the process of development of mankind, and negatively affects the ecology with its capitalist policy. We need a completely different, modern universal social communist principle and approach of redistribution and control of resources, based on the principle of transparency of transactions, like cryptocurrencies, without intermediaries, which is able to stop corruption, crime, wars, and affect the economy and, most importantly, ecology, as the main purposeful problem and task of the modern world. 7. Man is considered to be a reasonable supreme being on earth, who, according to all human principles, should live in a creative society with a planned world economic term, where the main goal of the economy is to increase the well-being of each person on the planet and improve the environment with minimal costs and without damage. And not as in a capitalist society, with market or imaginary economy, where the main goal of such a society is money at any price, which leads to the destruction of all living things and the planet as a whole, and has nothing to do with the economy and human development. All people should strive to become human, strive to be like the Creator, and unite in a single world, like a single organism, for a prosperous life and development. Everything should be in measure in the image and likeness of the Creator. 8. Energy is all around us. There is enough of it without the use of hydrocarbon fuels. We just need to start using it. Thus we will restore ecology and save the planet from destruction. 9. Summarizing the results. Observing the situation in the world, the modern not reasonable mankind, unfortunately, is not capable of changing and solving the above-mentioned basic problems. It will rely on its gods, or someone else, and not on its human mind, approach, unification to solve the problems created by it. And as a result, we will come back to the result where I started this review of the problem. And you cannot run away from the problem or fly away. For example, to Mars, where Elon Musk aspires, because the same thing will happen. In the end, karma will reward everyone. It exists, and you cannot escape from it. It can only be changed by actions, not by waiting. So spread this video, unite, compliment and support this idea and channel. Have a good day everyone.